Greetings again, and welcome back to my now named YouTube channel. We're calling it The Blood of Numenor. In another video, I'll probably go over the other names I was considering and why I ended up not going with them, but that's going to be for something else. This particular video is going to be part one in a additional kind of chain of videos that I'm going to be making. The previous one from yesterday was kind of like a long-winded discussion of like a thematic element. And a plot point. These ones are going to be more in-depth, looking at one particular scene in the movies and perhaps how that contrasts the scene in the books or something like that. In this particular episode, though, we're going to be looking at the last interaction between Aragorn and Frodo before the Return of the King, so at the very end of the Fellowship. So let's go ahead and jump right in.
Would you destroy it?
I would have gone with you to the end. Into the very fires of Mordor.
So if you haven't seen this scene recently, I've got a link to it in the description. But there are basically two things to understand to really grasp the significance of it and why it was a great addition. Because this scene does not really exist at all in the books. Nothing like it. And that is the difference between the books and the movies as to how the ring is affecting people, and B, the differences in the character of Aragorn between the books and the movies. And you know what? I guess see what the members of the Fellowship actually know about where Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin are at the time. So, the first thing. In the books, the ring is still having a strong effect on the members of the Fellowship. However, due to the fact that it's, a book and has a lot of pages to describe things, it is taking longer to do so. It's really only affected super strongly Boromir at this point in time. In the movies, obviously, everybody's kind of feeling it, including Aragorn. And that brings us into our second point, which is the differences between book Aragorn and movie Aragorn. Book Aragorn is not overly confident or too sure of himself, but he is sure in his right to rule and his knowledge that he will do a good job. He has been making ready for this decision his entire life. The entire reason he's been out in the wilderness is not because he's in a self-imposed exile, but because he is waiting for the opportune moment to take up that burden and that leadership role. And they make that very obvious throughout the entirety of the books. That was when I was rereading the books, that was one of the things that really jumped out at me, was the differences between Aragorn. He's still clearly the same character. I still picture him as Viggo Mortensen. But one is a confident hero, and they're both confident heroes, but one is also a very confident king and knows that that is his destiny. And in that regard, he is somewhat immune to the ring in the books, in kind of a Samwise style way, where he wants nothing to do with that, as it is very clearly made in the Council of the Fellowship, in the Council of Elrond bit in the books. So because that they're, and then obviously there's movie Aragorn, who is less sure of himself. He doesn't want to make the same mistakes as his ancestors did, as he says, because the blood of Isildur, the same blood flows in his veins, the same weakness. So he is much more reluctant to take up that power for fear that he makes the same mistakes. And obviously also in the books, since this scene never happens, Frodo and Sam's location is actually completely unknown to the members of the Fellowship, the surviving members, that is. Aragorn has to do a good bit of deliberation to figure out whether or not he's going to go after Frodo and Sam or go after Merry and Pippin, because this scene doesn't happen. But what's really interesting is really in the second point about the differences between Aragorn. If Aragorn is less confident in his ability to make a different decision than what Isildur made, he's been terrified his entire life that he's going to make the same mistake, Obviously that doesn't exist in the book, but it does in the movie. And since it exists in the movie, we need to have that particular scene come to fruition. We need to figure out what exactly Aragorn would do when he's faced with that temptation. And that's what makes this scene so fantastic is, yeah, they have a change in the character from the book, but they absolutely resolve the plot line that it opens up. What happens if Aragorn is faced with the exact same situation that Isildur is faced with? And what we get is this great scene where Frodo holds out the ring to him and says, "Would you destroy it?" And Aragorn closes his hand and said, "I would have gone with you to the end, into the very fires of Mordor," and sends Frodo away. And this scene is amazing, especially when contrasted with the books, because, like I've said, it's completely unnecessary in the books because the character of Aragorn doesn't need, his plot is different a little bit. He doesn't need that mini arc resolved because that mini arc doesn't exist. Whereas in the movies, that mini arc does exist, and this is a key point where he proves to himself that he can do it. Obviously, he's still reluctant throughout the rest of the story, but I think that's a really real turning point in Aragorn's character, where he has done what Isildur couldn't do, and I think that's a very beautiful scene. So that's going to be it for this one. If you enjoy these kind of short ramblings about particular scenes, then please do like and subscribe and all that business, and see you guys in the next one. Toodaloo.